Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic, a Telltale gamer, bringing latest and everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. And so here we are back again with another review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2 Power of the Spark. This time we're looking at Episode 6, Dark Birth, and honestly, as a big Starscream fan, I gotta say, it's really great to have an episode pretty much primarily focused on him. And after his supposed death by the hands of Megatron at the end of Episode 2, Bad Moon's Rising, we saw him return briefly at the very end of the last episode, Episode 5, Trials, and now we finally get to learn how Starscream ended up surviving, presumably being killed by Megatron at the end of Episode 2, and I gotta say, this episode really delivers on further advancing the plot of this episode, and hopefully sets up something good for the second half of Season 2, considering we're almost at the halfway point this season. Technically, we're actually one-third of the way, we're one-third of the way through Season 2. There's 18 episodes in Season 2, and with this Episode 6, yeah, we've got another 12 episodes before this season ends, and I'm really interested to see where it goes, so we're gonna go ahead and see everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. So, this episode starts off immediately at the end of Episode 2, Bad Moon Rising, where, yeah, that happens. So anyway, we cut immediately to after Megatron presumably killed Starscream and dumped his body off the Nemesis, which, Boulder Media, your guy's gonna kill me making me watch this again, watching Starscream's body fall ragdoll down the bridge of the Nemesis, and then fall limplessly through the air and land on the moon. My heart can only take so much, but anyway, as Starscream's body just lays motionless on the moon's surface as the Nemesis takes off, we suddenly cut to Starscream's eyes just rebooting all of a sudden, and then Cheetor is staring over him in his cheetah form, and Starscream is still, despite having the major injuries he sustained back in Episode 2, still seems to be able to move to some degree, and notices Cheetor standing over him. And then when he realizes Starscream's awake, Cheetor flees through a ground bridge, but leaves it open for Starscream to presumably travel through. And I guess we can assume at some point there, Cheetor went through the ground bridge to somewhere else, fixed himself up, and got the Allspark later on in Episode 5. But that's the thing, that's the one con I have. We don't exactly know how Starscream ended up fixing himself up. We could assume maybe the Allspark fixed him up, or he just did something to heal himself, but it's kind of stuff like that where, even though it seems like such a small detail, I really wish Boulder Media would have further clarified, on what exactly Starscream did to fix himself up. But anyway, the episode follows after that to, where we cut back to, if this is following Starscream's plot, it kind of jumps out of order between this plot and then basically the Autobot and Decepticon plots. But the Starscream plot essentially continues back where Episode 5 ended, with Slipstream confronting Thundercracker, Novastorm, and the rest of the Seekers about where they've been, only to find out that Starscream has been basically guiding them to bring Vector Sigma to him. So after that, we cut to Starscream basically explaining his plan to Slipstream and the other Seekers, and Slipstream oddly seems to be going along with it, but as we later find out this episode, this is just a ruse, as she still seems very loyal to Megatron for the most part. Essentially, what Starscream claims is that basically, after having been killed by Megatron, he claims that he touched the Allspark in a sense and came back to his body. This could be a nice little nod to the fact that in most Transformers continuity, specifically G1 Starscream essentially has an immortal spark, where basically this is most notably in the G1 movie, where after Galvatron comes back and kills Starscream, Starscream actually returns in Season 3 of G1 as a ghost that is able to possess other people, and even happens later in Beast Wars, where he comes back from the future, I think, and possesses, like, some Beast Wars characters. Again, my knowledge of Beast Wars is very limited, and then this is even brought up in stuff like the IDW comics and so on. So it's not too much of a reach to assume that could be what's happening in Cyberverse, that Starscream's spark is truly immortal, and that maybe just the Allspark rejected him, dying, and just popped him back into his body. Or it could just be Starscream just slowly going insane and just claim that he's immortal, and that's Megatron didn't actually kill him, but just beat him to the point of near death. It could be one of the two. And that's kind of what Slipstream says to try and convince Novastorm that, like, Starscream's going insane at this point, when Starscream reveals his plan is not to just create his own army and take over the Decepticons. No, he just wants to achieve world peace by pulling an Eren Yeager and just killing every single Autobot and Decepticon so that only the Seekers remain. And so Slipstream is rightfully horrified by this, but Nova Storm seems to try and say that, while Slipstream tries to convince Nova Storm and the other Seekers that Starscream's gone insane, Nova Storm states otherwise, saying that Starscream has become a whole new person now. And that could be that the Allspark maybe did turn Starscream a little bit insane. And if that's the case, it does kind of paint Starscream as a tragic figure in a way, in the fact that we saw back in episode 2 that he was constantly harassed and mocked by Megatron throughout the war, and even to the point where, to the point where he eventually got so harassed there, he tried to kill Megatron, and then ended up being nearly killed, or actually killed by him in the process. So it would make sense to believe that maybe Starscream has a few screws loose from that experience, but who knows what exactly it is. I just wish, again, Boulder Media kind of went further into that, but it doesn't detract from the episode that much, in my opinion. Now, taking a break from the Starscream plot of this episode, we cut back to where episode 5 ended, with Optimus introducing Cheetor to the rest of the Autobots. Cheetor tries to explain to the rest of the Autobots where exactly he came from, and this is a question I had back in episode 5 when Cheetor basically introduced himself as the guardian of the Allspark. Cheetor basically explains that he was actually part of the Allspark until the Allspark arrived on Earth millions of years ago, and the Allspark decided it needed a guardian, so it just popped Cheetor's spark out of the Allspark and put it in the form of a cheetah, which makes sense considering that's like kind of the plot of Beast Wars. And Cheetor basically followed the Allspark across Earth for years, defending it, and it's honestly, this backstory for Cheetor kind of makes him very similar to Teletran X in that they're both spawns of very important objects in the Transformers universe, specifically with Cyberverse. Especially the only ones I can think of are Teletran X, of course, being a spawn of Teletran 1, meant to preserve the archives of Teletran 1, while Cheetor is a spawn of the Allspark, meant to protect it. And by that way, we can kind of see that basically Cheetor is the Allspark, and essentially is a personified version of him, or of the object of the Allspark. And that actually gets me really excited to see that physical objects are actually getting personalities in Cyberverse, and that's something that's really cool to see. But unlike Teletran X, who I've just found so annoying, thankfully he's not as annoying as he was in Season 1, but Cheetor is actually a lot funnier than Teletran X. I enjoy how extravagant he can be, but also at the point, Cheetor is extremely pessimistic on himself. He always blames himself for being a bad guardian of the Allspark, that he let Starscream take it, and that when he can't find the Allspark by sensing it out, he feels himself as just a horrible guardian. And as sad as it makes me feel that Cheetor thinks so lowly of himself, I also find it a bit humorous in a dark sort of way, and especially how caring Bumblebee and Hot Rod especially are towards him, and wanting to reassure him and that he's doing his best. So essentially, Cheetor ends the story by basically stating that he was going to keep the Allspark for himself until the Autobots and Decepticons learn to stop their fight and work together to restore Cybertron. But now that they believe Megatron has the Allspark because Megatron claimed that Starscream did it on his behalf, Optimus launches an assault on the Nemesis to get it back. That brings us to the Decepticon side of the story, where Megatron is basically trying to do the same thing that Cheetor and Optimus and the other Autobots are doing, trying to locate where Starscream is so they can find the Allspark. And while Shockwave's trying to triangulate Starscream's position, of course Optimus arrives with Cheetor, Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and the rest of the Autobots to fight back for the Allspark from Megatron, who they believe still has it. Megatron decides to go ahead and take his Decepticons to battle the Autobots, while Shockwave stays behind the Nemesis to keep locating Starscream. And that brings us to, again, another great large-scale battle between the Autobots and Decepticons, which is something I'm really happy to see after the rather lackluster large-scale battles we had in Season 1. Every large-scale battle in Season 2 has felt like a actual, true war or battle, so to speak. Especially back in Episode 1 of this season, when all the Autobots and Decepticons were fighting on the moon, and then we had this episode now, where Optimus and Megatron are fighting each other. We even have, all the other Autobots and Decepticons fighting all around them. And then there's a small little, side story here, where Bumblebee and Hot Rod are working with Cheetor, just sneak around in the base to try and find the Allspark. And again, Cheetor's still trying to sense it out, but he just can't find himself to, causing himself to doubt himself even more. But after some encouragement from Hot Rod and Bumblebee and taking out Lockdown and Clobber, who find them with Hot Rod unleashing like a large gout of flames at them, Cheetor does manage to locate the Allspark and demands to speak to Optimus and Megatron. So that basically leads to Hot Rod and Bumblebee taking Cheetor through the Nemesis down to the hangar where Optimus and Megatron are currently fighting amongst all the other Decepticons, where Cheetor interrupts their fighting by just doing a loud roar at them and reveals that the Allspark isn't actually anywhere on the Nemesis. And this causes Megatron to finally reveal to Optimus that Starscream did steal the Allspark, but for himself and not for Megatron and the other Decepticons. So that's kind of where the Autobot and Decepticon plot in this episode ends. But it does make it interesting, the fact that I'm eager to see how this goes forward. Are we going to have an alliance between the Autobots and Decepticons for the remainder of the season to take down Starscream? And then is Megatron just gonna, once they do, is Megatron gonna steal the Allspark back and just become like the final villain of season 2? Who knows? Because remember, guys, I know Cyberverse is over now, but when Cyberverse was first being produced, it was only planned to be a 2-season show. Seasons 3 and 4 were never in the original plan for Cyberverse. So if that was the big plan, that Megatron, that Starscream was going to be the main villain of season 2, then towards the end of the season, Megatron and Optimus managed to beat Starscream, presumably killing him, and then Megatron maybe takes it to become the final villain, and then Optimus defeats him. I can understand then maybe seasons 3 and 4 go a different direction. If that's the case, I totally understand that, but hopefully that's not the case, as I want to see more of Starscream in this show. So let's go ahead and see where that goes with the end of this episode, which focuses on Starscream. So at the end of this episode, we cut back to the Starscream plot, as I'm going to call it, where Starscream decides to basically give Slipstream and the other Seekers a demonstration of what the Allspark can do. And similarly to how we saw Cheetor use the Allspark to give Optimus and Megatron the helicopter and fighter jet armor, Starscream uses the Allspark to take a abandoned excavator and use it to create a large, like, sort of Constructicon / Devastator type armor for himself. And this was the armor we saw him don in the season 2 opening, where he used the Allspark and then he's surrounded by Hot Rod, RC, Grimlock, Cheetor, and a bunch of other Autobots. And so this really makes me feel like Starscream is definitely posed to be the main villain of season 2, and basically just tries to further cement himself as like the actual leader of the Seekers, which all of them sans Slipstream seem to be down for. And Slipstream, speaking of which, while Acid Storm tries to use Vector Sigma or calibrate Vector Sigma to create stuff, to create a new army for Starscream with the Allspark, Slipstream tries to steal it back for Megatron, only because she of course doesn't believe in the genocide plan that Starscream has going on. But Starscream manages to get to her first and beats her up a little bit, cornering her, and Slipstream taunts Starscream, thinking that Starscream's about to kill her, but Starscream actually doesn't. He says that he wants Slipstream to see just how more successful he'll be than Megatron, and actually spares her, which I was really, really surprised by, because we've seen throughout season 2 and even back in season 1 that Starscream really doesn't like Slipstream. He's really despised her incompetence back in season 1 and feels totally betrayed by Megatron when he made her the head of the Seekers back in episode 1 of season 2. So I thought for sure that this was going to be Starscream killing Slipstream off of this. I really thought. And the fact that he decides to spare her instead and try to convince her to join him, that really makes me see that Starscream is a lot more charismatic than I thought he was going to be in Cyberverse. And I mean, of course, we've seen Starscream be charismatic before. The biggest example would be back in episode 7 of season 1, when we saw the flashback of him and Windblade going out to the Cube game together. I really think that Starscream's going to be an interesting villain this season, and to see how he manipulates Slipstream, if she still is actually fully 100% on board with Starscream's plan, remains to be seen. So after Starscream spares Slipstream, Acid Storm finally gets the Vector Sigma all calibrated and ready to merge with the Allspark, and we also get a nice little tidbit from them where they state that they were actually an assistant to Shockwave back in as they were part of the Decepticons, and we've seen this a little bit throughout towards the end of season 1, even earlier episodes of season 2, where they worked a lot with Shockwave, which is a nice little interesting thing to give basically just more backstory and character to Acid Storm. But and I thought just a little thing I thought was pretty cool. But once Acid Storm gets its Vector Sigma calibrated, Starscream activates it and merges it with the Allspark to create a brand new army for him. And this army is actually an army of Scraplets, which I was totally not expecting. Now, for those who don't know, Scraplets were a small race of like mini Transformers that were introduced back in Transformers Prime almost 10 years ago, when basically they're kind of just a cannibalistic piranha type of Cybertronian race that basically feeds on Transited Cybertronians by devouring their flesh and other scrap, hence the name of them, Scrap Eaters. Or Scraplets, I'm sorry. But the fact is, the Scraplets look very, very similar to how they did in Transformers Prime, and I was really, really surprised by that. But it really makes me interested as to see what Starscream is going to do with these Scraplets. I imagine one of these later episodes is definitely going to revolve around these Scraplets attacking the Autobots and/or Decepticons, and basically them trying to figure out a way how to deal with them. I definitely think that's going to set up as 1 or 2 episodes this season, and it really makes me wonder what Starscream's endgame is. If this is his plan to use the Scraplets to kill the Autobots and Decepticons, or is there a bigger plan in his mind? And so that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, Episode 6, Dark Birth. If I had to rate this episode easily, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. Great to see a Starscream-focused episode after Bad Moon Rising, where we saw Megatron brutally kill Starscream, or at least beat him to near death. It's very unclear what exactly Megatron did to him. And Starscream's plot of basically just wiping out all Autobots and Decepticons so that there can be peace around the galaxy seems to be a really interesting point for Starscream, is that that's never been what Starscream's about. He's always wanted to just take over the Decepticons for himself and kill all the Autobots and Megatron. That's always been Starscream's plan throughout other Transformers universes. But to have it basically just go full genocide route in Cyberverse is really interesting. But again, also Cheetor is a very interesting character, and I love his interactions with Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and the rest of the Autobots and Decepticons. The only thing is, I just wish we got more clarification on how Starscream fixed himself up, and just some other minor nitpicks that take that half point off. So that's going to be it for this episode. I'll be back soon with Episode 7 Parlay. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And I might know what our future, but then you still control the past.